Hello and welcome to the video. I'm gonna go through how I painted this scene here. It's a farming scene and the paper I'm using is Baohong 300 GSM cold press. I've got a longer video that goes on for about 30 something minutes. If you want to check that out, I'll link it in the description. I'm starting out with a really quick wash, very light wash of some cerulean blue, mixing in a bit of neutral tint and ultramarine through as well, just to imply some clouds. Notice as well that I'm not actually going over the entire sky. I'm leaving a bit of white in there, so that's always a good idea to get a bit of variation in the sky, some highlights on some of the clouds. While the paint's still wet, I'm going through and dropping in some little darker spots. I'm still getting used to this paper. It's quite interesting, the texture of it, and especially to draw, and I find as well feels more like a rough paper. Now this is an interesting bit here. So the mountains and the clouds, all I'm doing is just picking up a bit of this darker blue paint. It's a bit of cobalt blue and I'm just dropping it in the background to get some soft edges in some areas, and you'll notice in some other areas as well it's a harder edge. So having that kind of variation makes things look a bit more interesting. And I've got some sap green here. I'm just mixing that in to the bottom of that blue and carrying it further down the page, just leaving in little highlights as well, cutting around some of these houses. And what I'm doing here, I'm just flicking a little bit of water on the paper just to get some little incidental blooms, and just bringing this wash all the way down the bottom. I'm darkening it up a bit as well, so just adding in a teeny bit of blue and a little bit of neutral tint as we get further down to the bottom of the page. I think I'm just adding in a bit of yellow down the bottom as well. And here I've got a little spray bottle. Keep that with me, and that just helps with these sort of situations here where I want to join two edges together and get a bit of texture going on as well. So that's all dried off now, and what I am going to do is try to get in some of these midtones, work on the houses and get in some bushes, trees, that sort of thing. So you need to make sure that the paper is completely dry before you get into this stage. And what I'm doing now is just basically adding in some little trees in the background using a small round brush. And I'm using a smaller round brush because it just allows me to get in the shape of those trees a lot easier. And around the sides of these houses, what I'm doing is that I'm also just picking up a bit of this darker pigment, darker green pigment, and adding some trees behind and around the houses. And the reason for this is that it just helps to draw out the houses a little bit more, creating a bit more contrast. Just a little trick that I've learned. So just going around and adding in a few extra trees here and there and using it to kind of create a bit of a scene, a bit of a pathway into the scene. As you get down to the front, just darken the trees a little bit more. I've added in a darker tree on the right hand side, and that just helps to add a bit of extra detail in the foreground, keep things interesting. I've got to just make the things in the foreground a little bit more detailed, and I'm going to add the fence and a few other extra bits and pieces as well. check out these tutorials down the side here. I've got a couple of playlists that will help you get some ideas and improve your watercolors.